these rats that are in these labs, they feed them coke or sugar. They prefer sugar.
That's for real?
Oh yeah, there's plenty of people out there.
They can literally live off of water and vitamins?
They're killing all of the stuff in the food, the bacteria, but then they're also making it. Yeah, I talk to so many people that are like, okay, well, after I get, control of my appetite and whatnot, what do I do? And I always say, have you ever stopped to think why cashiers always have all the junk food? You know why? This is crazy. This is mind-boggling.
Ruslan.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with one of my favorite people in the world when it comes to faith and fitness. He is my coach, and he's helped me lose over 30 pounds. And he is here back for the second time. Something's real when someone's back for a second time. That means they're almost like a regular around here. We got Coach JT.
Hey, brother.
Thanks for being here, man. Okay, let's jump right in. So last year, I followed the Empty Your Bucket plan. I lost over 30 pounds.
Yep.
And I was able to course correct after traveling and after kind of being pretty fried from moving and building this studio and all these different things. And this time around, I discovered what I think is perhaps the biggest unlock, and we talked a little bit about on the 500K stream celebration, glycogen depletion. Okay. And I didn't catch glycogen depletion the first time around. I knew intrinsically what it was, just being an athlete. And most people experience it if you train hard.
Right.
But unpack glycogen depletion and how it's not something that most people are factoring in their fitness journey.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a tendency to think of, I'm overweight, I have all this weight to lose, but we don't think of weight in terms of energy. And when someone needs to lose weight, they're in an excess, a surplus of calories.
Right.
So your body, when you eat, will utilize some of those calories for, just your basal metabolic rate, which is just the energy you need to live, to breathe, to think, to do all these things. And then, of course, whatever you do in terms of exercise, and then whatever your body doesn't utilize, it stores in the liver and in the muscle.
And before we get too advanced, basal metabolic rate, that is the amount of calories your body needs based on your height and weight to just function. If you stay in bed all day, your body naturally burns this amount of calories.
That's exactly it.
Okay, so for me, I think last time I checked it was around 1,800 calories.
Yep.
It's no exercise, no walking, no moving. If I just lay in bed all day, I'll burn 1,800 calories.
That's right. Yeah, you could stay in bed all day, and that's exactly what you would burn. So on top of that, when you exercise, you deplete some more of those calories. Glycogen depletion basically says, and specifically metabolic flexibility, which is the ability for your body to partition fat and sugar efficiently. So we have two sources of energy: sugar, which generally comes from carbohydrates, and fats, which usually come from either your proteins or olive oil, coconut oil, things of that nature. And so what we want to do, most general population, they're sugar burners. Vast majority of people you see running around are sugar burners. Hence the reason they're always sick. Hence the reason they feel lethargic. Hence the reason they have all these issues, especially as they age. If you've read Grain Brain, it says that type 3 diabetes, right, is actually is basically a byproduct of your nutrition. Americans are eating a lot of sugar in terms of carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Which
isn't it something like the average American eats their body weight in sugar every year?
I mean, it's a ridiculous amount.
It's a crazy amount.
Yeah, and if it weren't for negative feedback, which is a really interesting concept, and the concept says that if your body does anything extreme, your body will hold back, right? So negative feedback is very much like a hangover is negative feedback, right? Your body is saying, hey, you drank all this stuff yesterday, don't do it again today, because you're going to break me. If you gain too much weight, your body stops you from gaining too much weight. So the average American that's 350 pounds should really be 700 pounds. But they're not that because of negative feedback. Same thing happens when people come into our program. They have these big leaps and bounds, right? And so, we have people in 6 weeks in that are losing 15, 25, 30 pounds, right? And then all of a sudden, week 4 and onward, they start to lose maybe 1, 2 pounds. And they get, most people are like, oh, stop, I'm going into a plateau. It's a natural thing that happens, is that negative feedback. And we're thankful for that. So God put that in place for a very specific reason.
And what you mean by negative feedback is you kind of it requires more effort. It sounds like to go beyond a certain physical limit and to go underneath a certain threshold.
We have a weight set point.
Yes.
So the body basically what it does is it gets your subconscious mind is very aware of your set point. So, you know, for some people, let's say that's 200 pounds and, you know, they may get on one of these starvation diets, get down to 170 and quickly they bounce back to 200 pounds. And sometimes that weight comes on with a vengeance. It's because of that set point. Mm-hmm. And so what we need to do is really, we need to we need to bypass the watchdog of the brain, which is, you know, your brain is always scanning for things that are dangerous, or things that it wants to push back on. And we get past that, and what we do is through transitioning from, for example, phase 1, 2, and 3, which is what we do in our program, is we want to bypass the subconscious brain and get it to understand that what's happening is actually positive. So it doesn't fight with that negative feedback, and it's always pushing you back to your original weight. Because what the body's doing is simply saying, well, this person is in some kind of famine, right? Let's put weight back on. But if you know how to transition well, your body then settles in to that new 170, 175, whatever it is for you. And now you're not yo-yo dieting anymore.
It seems like the depletion of glycogen, which glycogen is what comes in our muscles from glucose and fructose, right? Sugar.
Yep.
It seems like that depletion for my body at least creates a different clarity in my headspace. I last time around, I stopped consuming sugar altogether, right? With very rare exceptions of like a dinner or like a birthday party. No sugar ever, which I used to be a sugar all the time kind of guy, right? And I'm not talking fruit. I'm talking like dessert. Yeah. Like daily dessert. I'm Fat Boy Tendencies.
Like real sugar.
Yeah, real sugar. So getting off the sugar was a huge thing for me. And I still don't consume sugar. But there also seems to be something to switching into using fat as fuel. Right. And it seems like as my body's depleted of glycogen, which by the way, it's for my research, glycogen depletion, 80 minutes of intense exercise and your body's depleted of glycogen for most people from what I've researched.
That depends on
how intense the exercise.
Yeah, well, it depends on how much you have stored.
Okay.
Right, because you have people that are 250, 300 pounds that can literally live for an entire year on water and vitamins and then just consume their own energy because they have so much energy.
That's for real?
Oh, yeah. There's plenty of people out there.
They can literally live off of water and vitamins?
Brother, there's people.
I thought Alex Hormozy was capping when he said that on the Graham Stephan show.
No, that is very real. There are people out there, I feel sorry for these people because there's no need to do that lick salt and have vitamins.
Wow.
To try to lose 300 pounds.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, but that comes, you lose the weight, but then you also lose bone density and muscle and a bunch of other things. And you know, the crazy thing is you can lose weight and still remain with high body fat percentages. And the hallmark of health is low body fat. That is the hallmark.
So it seems like when I'm in a set place, or not a set place, when I'm moving towards a place where I'm not using carbs for fuel, that I am, one, I feel better. Two, I am able to get into a fat burning state quicker. I can burn those fat reserves faster because my body is now using fat for fuel instead of carbohydrates for fuel.
Correct. You're metabolically flexible, right? Because now you're partitioning fat for fuel and not storing it. You know, there's so much involved, right? You have leptin levels, which is basically a regulator in your brain. And the more fat you have, the more leptin you have. Leptin basically signals your body and it says, hey, you have sufficient food or you don't. And so if you're always starving, your leptin levels are through the roof. And so that you need to, buy a different lifestyle, low carbohydrate diet. And what you were saying, that mental clarity that you get is simply because your body operates way better on fat than it does on sugar. And so as we do that for a prolonged period of time, what your body does is it becomes more efficient. You don't get sick as much. So your immune system's edified. You sleep better, you breathe better, all your systems are 100 times better. So the enemy is not fat. The enemy is sugar. And so if we can figure out a way to balance things out, because we don't demonize food groups, we don't say carbs are bad, you just have to know how to use them. You have to be very intentional with your starches. And the problem is, Americans eat starch at breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Yeah. So I think for me, having experienced going down to the lowest weight I'd ever been, and then after traveling, kind of gaining a little bit of that weight back, the phase 1 of this has allowed me to course correct. And now I'm back into the 170s, which is a great place for me. Yeah. And the interesting part is that when you see other people give nutritional advice, whether it's Alex Hormozy, whether it's Coach Greg, they kind of go back to the like very, very basic. And I guess it's because it's generalized advice, right? Calories in, calories out. You can eat whatever you want as long as you get your 2 pounds of meat a day, and then the rest you can have this, you can have that. Use this bread to build this sort of grilled cheese sandwich with low-fat cheese and all that sort of stuff. And I think that may work for some people that have like never tried, right? Or it may work for younger people who have strength trained. But for me, the calories in, calories out, obviously calories in, calories out on a basic level, but not all calories are built the same. In the sense that if I'm eating bread and if I'm eating processed carbs, if I'm eating, I mean, Alex Hormozy was talking about cereal, right? I don't know if you saw his nutrition video. Yeah. And for me, because I'm a fat boy at heart and I love dessert, that is going to make me eat more food.
Sure.
Right? Like even if I stick within this thing, my cravings are going to be through the roof. Yeah. So it's like calories in, calories out. Maybe for the generalized person that's never tried to track calories and never did macros. But I feel like for me, whenever I've tried to do like, I'm just going to scan the barcode on everything I eat and just log it, it always goes out of control, right? Yeah. And that's not to mention some of the other things that they're consuming that is probably impacting that. Yeah. So how does the average person get to this? How do we move past calories in, calories out to understand that not all calories are built the same and that certain calories are going to make you more hungry because they're processed, because they're refined grains, because they're just not really built for you?
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there, right? First of all, I think that the vast majority of these guys that are out there speaking about nutrition are saying the most polarizing things because they're trying to get clicks, right? The truth is, nutrition is very simple, but there's such thing as reoccurring revenue, and a lot of these guys need a reoccurring revenue, so they make it very complex. So the whole idea of calories in, calories out is true, right? You know, that's a physical law. If you get your macros right, then you're going to lose weight. The question is, do you want to lose weight? Or do you actually want to master food?
Yeah, that's good.
And so that's the big differentiator. Yeah. It's not just getting to a certain weight point, right? Because then you become a slave to the scale. But if you can actually master the ability to self-regulate, then it's a game changer. And then you'll never yo-yo diet again. And then you don't have to count macros, calories, or points because that's a crazy game to play. Most people don't want to play that game. Even professional athletes, what we call level 3 athletes, they don't macro count forever, right? And so we want to find something sustainable, and more importantly, we want to find something that actually frees us from the need to constantly think about food. It's an obsession. Food is an idol. Hence all 3 religions embrace fasting. Major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, is because that is a control tool. And so if we manage to live a life of fasting while eating, tricky, right? Fasting while eating. So you're still eating, but you're fasting from certain foods. And you're doing that intentionally because what you're doing is wanting to stewardship your temple in a certain way. That's a game changer. That's a whole different game than all these guys are speaking about. So do calories in, calories out work? Yes. Is it more complex than that? 100%.
Yeah.
Right? We want to have balanced insulin levels. We don't want to be a slave to food. We want to have freedom around food. We want to be able to enjoy things. And if you can discipline yourself for 6 to 8 weeks and get the sugar cravings out, you will be able to self-regulate and live a life of freedom around food.
Yeah, that's so good. I think that key is getting the cravings out, which for me, the cravings will dominate if you're not careful. So as I transitioned out of phase 1 last time, we talked about how I didn't do a good job of transitioning. And this is how it looked for me is if I'm on the go, I would get Chipotle, I'd get a salad. Okay, cool. Salad, a little bit of cheese. I go light on the cheese, double protein, avocado, pretty much my whole salad.
Right.
But what I did was I started getting a kid-sized chips inside a guac.
Yep.
Minimal calories, right? Minimal carbs. That turned into a large chips 3 months later.
Yeah.
Right? And it was because of those cravings started to come back. And I was like, oh, and I'm still not eating dessert and sugar. Like, I'm still avoiding that. But then all of a sudden I found myself like, wait a minute, now I'm craving more of these chips from Chipotle. And then I'm starting to crave dessert.
Right.
And that's when I was able to kind of self-regulate and reel it back in and go, I got to go scorched earth again, because that little drift of, I could have some chips. I mean, Alex Hormozy eats cereal, for crying out loud. I could have kids' chips, right? And so, like, unpack what's happening psychologically. What was happening psychologically there for me?
So I think it's important to preface the conversation with, I'm not saying I invented anything. Like Solomon said, everything under the sun is already invented. But I come from the world of counseling, and my master's degree is in eating disorders and substance abuse. And so while I was in school, no one ever talked about food. It was always the drugs, the alcohol, cigarettes, all the bigger vices. And what's interesting is what these guys are proposing is this in terms of alcohol. Hey, you can still drink beer and get sober. We know that's not true. Hey, you can still drink, you can still do drugs and be clean. That's not true. That will never happen. Same thing happens with food. If you continue to sprinkle these things in, you will never be able to self-regulate and have freedom around food. Think about this in rat labs. These rats that are in these labs, they feed them cocaine or sugar. They prefer sugar because sugar has a higher trough.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Than cocaine.
Yeah.
So the peaks and the troughs are different, right?
Yeah.
So you stay higher on sugar than you do on cocaine, longer.
Yep.
So they prefer sugar over cocaine.
Yeah. Yeah, and something like Chipotle chips, which seem innocent, because they're carbohydrates and they're salty.
Yeah.
The carbs are converting into sugar.
Yeah, there's a lot of things there. So you have a huge insulin peak from the potatoes.
Right.
That's what chips are. Let's call it what they are.
Yeah.
And then your sensory is just getting overwhelmed, right? You're getting hit. Your tongue is getting hit with salt. Immediately, what's happening is you're secreting dopamine, that neuroreceptor that's associated with well-being, and your brain goes, right? It's interesting because if you're honest with yourself, anytime that you're stressed or something bad is happening in your life, the first thing you think about is food, right? And you wonder why. Well, because there's all these emotional anchors around food. So your brain is very, very smart, and it's looking to be to alleviate whatever pang is going on. And we don't necessarily say, let me go smoke crack or let me go drink alcohol. We say, let me grab some food, that innocent drug, food. So it always goes under the radar, and it is the most, insidious vice out there, right? And so what's happening is you're getting this big insulin peak. Now you're secreting dopamine, and now your brain is going, Ruslan, every time you get stressed, you should grab some food, right? Here's another interesting thing with chips. I hear this right around week 3 or 4 of people being in abstinence from sugar. They're like, everything is going great, but I just miss the crunchy stuff. Now think about it, right? Like, crunchy is auditory. Why is that something that has anything to do with food?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Right? So you talk about emotional anchors. Emotional anchors is anything that happens when you're at a high peak level, whether it's you're sad or you're happy, and you hear a sound or you get it, or someone touches you a certain way, that gets anchored into your nervous system. So when you're having that emotion of delight because you're crunching on some chips as you're watching football, that's getting anchored into your brain through auditory. So you're hearing the crunch. This is why people 3-4 weeks of being in abstinence say, I want something crunchy. They don't want the crunchy thing. They just want the emotion that's associated with the crunch. Crazy.
That's insane. That's insane. And so I think for me, now it's been 4 weeks back on phase 1. So I'm getting carbs from, I don't know, stuff like Brussels sprouts and broccoli and that sort of stuff, right? But they're my family can get Chipotle. They could be a bag of chips at Chipotle sitting out, and I have zero desire to eat it. They could be sweet potatoes. I got zero desire to eat those. They could be whatever. And again, I'm not demonizing sweet potatoes because we put that as a healthy carb, right? But I think that when I noticed that in myself, I was like, oh, like this is how you drift. Like you drift in these little subtle ways, and before you know it, I'm sitting there having a large bag of chips and guac by myself, you know, like 1,400 calories for just the chips and guac. And I started by just wanting to pop in and grab a salad and a little small kids chips.
That's what happens. You know, it happens a lot to parents because most parents have the tendency to finish, you know, their kids will leave something on the plate, and before they wash the plate, they'll eat it. And then next thing you know, they're in the fridge grabbing the ice cream. And so, man, it's that stuff, you know, it's even happened to me. I intentionally go do that to see my response. So my kids have these amazing like chips, and they're healthy chips. They're protein chips. And I don't crave that stuff. But if I have one, I can't stop. And I know what's happening to my brain. I know what that's doing to me, and I still can't stop. So what is there to be said, you know, about the person that doesn't know what's happening? They're just like, oh, I'm just eating, you know. But wait, this is healthy, because 9 out of 10 people that I speak to say, JT, I'm a pretty clean eater. And then when we go in and we actually look at what they're eating, we're like, you know, or subconscious eating. That's the other one. Most people don't realize what they're eating. You ask them, and they're like, oh, I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then you go, but wait a second, these numbers don't make sense. Well, how so? You're eating clean here. If you're eating this, you should be in a deficit. And then it takes them a while, like 25 minutes of me just like asking questions, specific questions for them to go, oh yeah, I didn't realize, you know, I had this thing or I had that thing. Those little calories. I had a lady who is clean on her diet. She was doing everything I was asking her to do, and yet her weight wasn't budging. And I was like, man, she was like, oh, it's my hormones. I'm big bone, you know, all these excuses you hear. And all of a sudden she's like, well, I eat gum. I eat about 3 packs of gum a day.
3 packs of gum a day?
Sugar-free gum.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was like, do me a favor, grab the gum and go to the caloric content. So she turns it around, and it says 5 grams of carbs. Oof. So she was compounding all of these carbs throughout the day. I mean, 3 packs of gum. You do the math, right?
That's crazy.
So I'm like, you might as well just go have a plate of pasta.
I think, you know, it's the snacking. Like another thing that crept up on me was the skinny pop bags of popcorn. They're like 100 calories. You know, I can have one of these a day. And before you know it, I've had 4. You know, and now I just consume 400 calories of popcorn. And granted, it's not, you know, it's not necessarily like spiking my blood sugar and putting on this stuff, but just the excess calories were just not good.
So, you know, with this whole idea of calories in, calories out, which drives me insane, it's very confusing, because if you take a Kit Kat, let's just say that Kit Kat has 500 calories, and then you take an 8 ounce of steak, right, 500 calories, and you put in a glucose monitor, and you eat the Kit Kat, the glucose monitor goes nuts. You eat the steak, your insulin levels peak a little bit, but not as much, because that's one of the great things about protein. It doesn't peak your insulin as much as other macronutrients. So 500 calories of a Kit Kat and a steak, same calories, radically different impact on your body and absorption.
Yeah, that's good. Now, isn't it possible to eat certain foods that would normally spike your blood sugar, but if you're eating them with other foods like protein or fat, that it kind of balances it out? So that, like, I read that somewhere, and then I thought, well, then why is pizza so bad for you, right? Because pizza has both fats, carbs, and protein. But yet pizza is not good for you, you know? So is that possible? Can stuff be balanced out with adding other food groups to offset blood sugar spiking?
So see, concepts like that are very confusing to people, right? Because what they're saying basically is that if you, for example, add extra fiber to your food, that will some way sort of erase those other calories you're eating. And that's not true. What that concept simply says is that if you bring more fiber into your diet, you'll be satiated faster. So then the way I look at it, and you know, on my way here, I was talking to a member, and they're going on a cruise. And I said, you know, you're going to be tempted by the buffet. I said, the best thing for you to do is get up the first time around, put protein on your plate, eat your protein, and then go back for seconds, and whatever you crave, do this and that. What I'm doing there is I'm getting them, you know, satiated through protein, so that when they go back, their mind's straight, right? Good. And now they're going to self-regulate better.
That's good.
Same thing when you bring in more fiber. So if you have a diet that's heavy in vegetables, I promise you won't overeat carbs, starchy carbs, right? Because fibers, carbs are still carbs, right? So that's the idea. The idea is not that they erase each other out. It's just that the more fiber you get, the more satiated you'll be, and the easier it'll be for you to self-regulate.
But it won't necessarily avoid the spike of the blood sugar as much.
That's the theory.
Okay.
That's the theory. But I would recommend get a glucose monitor.
Yeah.
Mix it however you want. You're going to spike a ton of insulin.
Yeah, I've been thinking about getting one of those. I just don't want to poke myself with something. That's the part where I'm like, ugh, I don't want to poke myself with something. Okay, that's good. So I think what I also enjoy is that when I was doing phase 1, I enjoy seeing the scale fall.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the scale falling is glycogen depletion, right? Like it's the fact that we're emptying ourselves of fluids. Right, but it's a nice psychological trick to be like, oh, dude, I'm 5 days in, I've lost 5 pounds, and then for week 4 or 5, I've been kind of 177, 178. If I'm not consistently hitting my slow burn cardios, or if I'm not training hard, I'll just kind of stay stuck.
Right.
But it is a nice like morale boost.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tricky thing, and I think that's the big trick of all fad diets, is that when you first get on a fad diet, you lose a ton of weight because you're flushing out most of the water, because carbohydrates carry a lot of water.
Right.
So, even people that have been depleting carbs will get dehydrated and get cramps and stuff because of the amount of water that's going out. So I like to say inside of our program, let's focus on the habits, and that's the win. Secondary to that is the metric.
Is the scale, yeah.
Because if you get hyper-focused on the scale, you'll go crazy. And it's really not an indicator of success. It's very elusive, right? You don't know what your body's doing. It could be retaining water, even though you're doing all the right things. We do, obviously, monitor weight because, once again, that's motivating. But the ultimate idea of success is that you're hyper-focusing on habits and not on weight, right? And so if you're doing everything you're asked to do, and the scale isn't looking the right way, eventually you will get to that metric. Right?
Yeah. What do you make of the rise in the carnivore diet and the animal-based diet? It's a similar idea, switch to fats for fuel, but then they're completely eliminating certain food groups.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, right? It's so confusing out there. You have so many different groups of people saying this, saying that. You have the vegans, you have the vegetarians, you have the carnivores. You have these people that are telling you that vegetables are bad for you. I recently heard a guy, he was like, it's the worst thing you can put in your body. I'm like, man, like that's insane, right? We advocate balance. Balance is where it's at. So, these people that are saying, yeah, carnivore works for me, I feel so much better. I hear people that have claims of their depression went away. They no longer have anxiety. Well, yeah, but what were you eating before? Right? And so if you can self-regulate those things and you can moderate those things, then you can have a balanced diet and get away from anxiety and all these other things. We have people in phase 2 and 3 that by the direction of their doctor, they're getting off of anxiety meds. We have people with type 2 diabetes, their entire lives with type 2 diabetes, that are putting type 2 diabetes in remission within 4 to 5 weeks of being on the program, right? I can go on and on and on and on about the benefits, and we are not demonizing macronutrients. And so anytime I see someone demonize a macronutrient, that's a red flag for me. The vast majority of these Netflix documentaries have agendas. I can't tell you how many times I have to refute What the Health.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because people will come to me and they're like, oh, I saw What the Health. I'm not eating, animal protein anymore. And I'm like,
my gosh.
And so I have them think through things. And I'm like, look, don't listen to content.
Yeah.
Listen to process.
That's good.
And so when you look at the way they have these documentaries set up, they have 3 angles. They have the ecological one, right? Oh, look at what we're doing to the environment. To the environment. Yep. So if that's your thing, then you're gonna be like, okay, then I'm no longer eating protein. Or you have the moral one: we're killing animals, and if you love animals, then you'll never kill an animal again. And then you have the health one, which is the one that gets everyone, right? Because no one wants to die, right? Even spiritual people. And so, the idea is that they're hitting you with these 3 angles to try to sell you on an idea. And we're all different. We're metabolically different. Everyone is very different, right? So I even in our program, we have vegans, vegetarians. I'm not dogmatic about those things. I'm like, how can we help? How can we optimize what you're already doing? But the idea is that everything God made is good. We just have to live in seasons.
That's good.
you know?
That's good. Yeah, I think the most egregious thing about that documentary and What the Health is they started with some weird presupposition that people use protein for energy.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Like
Yeah.
protein is not like, where are you guys getting this stuff from? You know,
Yeah.
it was wild just how bad it was.
Because they're on that whole premise of why bodybuilders use protein, right? Protein is a growth factor,
Right.
And so, God forbid, if I come down with if I come down with cancer, I'm going to stop eating protein because there's growth factor. So the last thing I want to do is have growth factor in my body while I have something that's growing in my body that's not good. Right. So yeah, I would go on a vegan diet if I got sick, but man, as soon as I get over the cancer, I'm back on protein.
Right.
Because that's how my body functions best.
Wow. That's interesting. Okay. So say someone's watching this and they know they need to make some changes and they're perhaps overweight. They understand that their eating is not good. They have tried calories in, calories out. They've tried macros. What are some basic, just actionable steps you would give someone that's watching this? And maybe they're curious about the program, but they're not really sure if they want to check out the Empty Your Bucket plan. What are some actionable steps you would say? Hey, let's just start here.
Yeah. So, the first thing I would say is there's hope. We've seen people come to our program with all sorts of dysfunctionalities, yo-yo dieters, preconceived notions, and couch potatoes. Our joke is that we take couch potatoes and make them into super potatoes in no time. And so the idea is that there is hope, right? Secondly, I would say that the first thing you want to do is look at your life and be realistic, right? If you're working 60 hours a week, you're going to have to find some hacks, some tricks. You're going to have to sit down and become very strategic about that stuff. And then I would say that there are many ways for you to...
Meaning that your season of life and your capacity may be different.
Correct.
Because I think that's a hard part. I don't think you're totally right. Not to cut you off, but like sometimes people don't factor in the season of life and the capacity they may have.
Right.
Right. If you're a new mom with a newborn,
right,
it's probably going to be very difficult for you to find, going to the gym 6 days a week.
Right.
Right.
And people get overwhelmed because they think they have to do it all at once. Right. It's like, I think it's January, February is when, I think chiropractors and physical therapists are the busiest. And it's because all these people are going into the gym and they're just full throttle, right? And they're getting hurt and they're getting injured. They don't have all the foundational movements down and people are getting all sorts of injuries. I think it's by March, you have the biggest peaks in people buying junk food because January, February, they went on this starvation mode and now they're just making up for it. So I think, to answer your question, I would say you have to become very strategic. You have to give yourself some grace and say, okay, in this season of life, what can I master, right? Is it walking, right? Is it walking for 25 minutes a day, right? It doesn't sound like a lot, but you start somewhere, you master that, and then you move on. Cut your meals in half, right? Portion control is always important, right? And so, my grandfather, who passed away recently, he was 98, former Mr. America. He was a cardiologist, only doctor I know that knew about nutrition. And that guy, we would go to restaurants, and even before the food came on the table, we would ask for a box, and he would just cut through half of his portion of the food.
Wow.
And so like, Grandpa, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm not going to eat all that food. He says, I'll eat the rest 4 hours later. And he says, if I do that, he says, I'll never have to worry too much about if I eat this or I eat that because I'm regulating my portions. So it's not the same to eat 1,000 calories in one sitting than it is to actually partition those calories throughout the day.
That's good.
So cut your meals in half. Start focusing on sleep. Man, can I tell you that the biggest problem out there is people are sleep deprived. I mean, we have people that do everything we ask them to do, and yet they're sleeping 4 to 5 hours and not making any progress because cortisol is just shooting through the roof. Right? That stress response hormone. And which we need a little bit of, by the way. But when we get too much, it's not favorable to weight loss. So focusing on getting to bed, right? I struggle with this idea. People have a hard time going to bed, and then in the morning they hit their snooze button 10 times. It's like, and so mastering these little things are the most important thing. And then overall, I would say that I think we have a tendency to want to do things on our own, right? We all want it. We're like, I can do this. And there's plenty of books. We live in America. This is the land of the gurus. It's not a lack of knowledge, but I believe I believe accountability is where it's at.
Yeah.
If you want to go to the next level, then invest in a coach that you can believe in. And then lastly, man, you know, for us, it's that whole approach of mind, body, spirit. You know, as people of faith, as Christians, we believe that we're called to honor God. And so if that is a compelling idea for you, that will take you further than wanting to look a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. What point would you recommend cutting out sugar? Because I feel like for me, that kind is always, even when in 2018, September of 2018, we did Whole30.
Mm-hmm.
And that Whole30, we were having sweet potatoes. There was no macro, no calorie, no nothing. But just getting off of sugar, like almost instantly, I was able to feel better, lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you prioritize getting off sugar?
So when you say sugar, what do you mean?
So I'm talking about
specific?
processed sugar. I'm talking like
okay.
dessert, and I'm talking about drinks with sugar, and I'm talking about really anything with added sugar.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think the faster you do that, the easier it'll be to self-regulate. I think that everything converts to sugar, by the way, everything. That's why when I hear people say, I'm cutting out sugar, I'm like, you're going to go live in a bubble, right? Because everything has sugar. We just have to know what's coming in, and I would just stay away from all the processed things.
Okay.
Best way to look at it, if it comes in a bag, in a jar, stay away from it. And then just eat the foods that God created.
Yeah.
You know, the vegetables, the proteins, the fats. If you can stick to that, you're gonna do well. You know, yeah, I can go on with the whole idea of also of Daniel plan and why I have so many. I push back so much on that stuff. I think it's a misinterpretation of the actual text.
Yeah, tell me about that. Why do you have an issue? Because that's also very trendy. January, everyone's on the Daniel plan.
Yeah.
Tell me, why do you have pushback on that?
So if you read the scriptures, what Daniel is doing is not a nutrition plan.
Mm.
He is simply understanding that his environment, the environment of the king, would defile his heart.
Mm.
And that initially came through because of the delicacies that they were eating. So he didn't want to be defiled by the king. One of my strongholds was, materialism, right? And so, give you a perfect example. Yesterday, we got to the airport. We had reserved a rental car. And as we were walking, the guy is like, hey, they passed us through the Enterprise luxury line. And he says, you can upgrade to a Mercedes SUV. Mm-hmm. My flesh goes 100%. Let's get the SUV. $25 more, no big deal. And then it's funny because because I know my strongholds, I try to stay away from those things. And I went for not the upgrade, just the regular car. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying here is that what I'm looking to do is not get defiled in my heart by these things. That's what Daniel was doing. He wasn't doing a nutrition plan, and he kept it very basic. The problem with the Daniel plan is that people will read that and take it as a prescription, and it's not. You can't live on vegetables. Well, you can, but you're going to live a miserable life living on vegetables and fruits, and And so when you look at it, they've taken the Daniel plan and they've doctrinalized the Daniel plan. There's entire churches that stand behind this.
Yep.
But is it the best thing to do? No.
Yeah.
I've seen people read Genesis and say that the Bible says that we should be vegetarians.
Yep. And
it's like, no, it's not really saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, that's good. I think the Daniel plan, I've done it one time and I felt awful. I was like, this again, it was good for me to get off sugar, right? And I'm having just raw veggies and nuts and whatever. So that was cool. But yeah, I felt terrible. Okay. Tell me your thoughts on strength training and where that plays a role. We were talking a little bit offline, and I was like, yeah, man, like I can go and train for over an hour, 5-6 days a week. I feel great, right? And I'm also not ego lifting, so I light weights. I'm not out here maxing out by myself. I'm not doing anything stupid.
Right.
But the strength training, when I got in shape the first time, thankfully I had a foundation of lifting all the way back to like 7th grade. So by the time I finally got the nutrition in check, I saw results pretty quick because I had some muscle already formed from just training, bad eating, right? Now I can just lock in, get into flow state, train, and it sounds like best bang for your buck in terms of my time at the gym. But not everybody can strength train, right? To your point, capacities, new mom, new baby, she may not be able to do that. But how important do you think is strength training for someone that's wanting to get a hold of this? Because I feel like if someone can master that aspect of it and learn the compound lifts and learn the muscle memory things, right? I think it's a good ROI. But yet at the same time, I mean, I was at the gym today and I was looking at some guys that like look pretty fit, and just kind of glancing over, I'm there doing chin-ups and like lifting actual weights, and they're like on a machine and then doing cardio.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, oh man, that's like what a waste almost, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah. So I think you made a strong point there when you said ego lifting. And I think most people go in with that idea that they want to look different, right? And the idea really, and the idea that I encourage people to have is you should want to live better.
That's good.
So, you know, I no longer train for aesthetics. That's a byproduct of training and eating right. But I don't train for that. I train because I want to be functional, because I want to be able to, you know, pick up my kids and throw them over my shoulder if the house is burning down, you know. Yesterday was a perfect example. The elevator went bad. There was some steep stairs. There was an older lady in her 80s trying to bring 2 suitcases up. So I had to run up to the second floor, bring her bags, come back and grab four of our bags. And I kept thinking in my head, man, if I didn't train, this would suck.
Yep.
You know, but I actually enjoyed going up and down those stairs.
Yep.
Why? Because I train to optimize living, not for ego.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, I think that's such a real world example of the functional side of 100%. All of this, right? That I think you do that. Do you like simple things like, hey, start out trying to do 100 push-ups a day? Those like very, very, very basic, like do something to just get yourself on base. Yeah,
I talk to so many people that are like, okay, well, after I get, you know, control of my appetite and whatnot, what do I do? And I always say, do whatever you enjoy. Do whatever you're going to do over and over again. So for some people, that's rollerblading. For other people, that's Pilates. It's, you know, it's strength training. Whatever you enjoy, as long as you're doing it consistently, what you want to do. And if I had my way and I could just plant this in everyone's head, you want to do HIIT training. You want to do HIIT training because it's the most functional way to get compound muscle groups and to be able to have good cardiovascular endurance. So if you're doing sufficient hits, and that's basically the way I do it, is I do 35 seconds on, and then I transition to another exercise, 35 seconds on, 35 seconds off, right? And then I go for 45, 50 minutes doing that. So it's like I've been doing cardio on top of doing weightlifting.
Yeah.
So I like it because it's a smart way to train.
Yeah, well, you're also getting into hypertrophy.
Correct.
And if you're lifting the right weights, your heart rate's shooting up. So it's like you're doing cardio while you're building muscle, which is great. I've been doing more circuits. I've been enjoying circuits. So I'll do chin-ups into what are the little things called where your toes are up? It's like a little box and your toes are on them. I got them for the knees over toes guy. So I'm doing deep squats.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
With those. And then I'll go and do some lateral raises. And then come back around, do some more chin-ups.
So that's how I train. So basically I'll have push, pull. So push, legs, and pull.
All in the same circuit?
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's like a typical kind of split. Yeah.
So Mondays I'll do, so for example, first circuit will be incline chest press, followed by lateral raises, followed by tricep kickbacks, followed by, bear hugs for core. And then I'll do 3 rounds of circuit 1. And then I'll go to circuit 2. And circuit 2, I switch all my exercises up. So I'll do a flat bench, front delts. I'll do tricep pull downs. And then I'll do V-ups. And I'll do that for 3 rounds. And then I'll go to circuit 3. And then I'll do dips. And then I'll follow that up with overhead press. So I'm hitting all the muscle groups, and I'm doing that in intervals of 35 seconds on, 35 seconds off.
That's good, yeah, because sometimes if you're lifting, you'll see guys waiting for minutes and minutes. They'll hit a 30, 45 second set,
crazy.
And then they're just kind of chilling for 2-3 minutes.
And they're just not functional at all.
Yeah.
Like you see the way they walk.
Right.
Most of the bigger guys that are doing progressive overload look like they swallowed the refrigerator, right? And I mean, they can't put on shirts. It's very uncomfortable. And being that muscular is the same as being obese.
Because your heart doesn't know the difference. It just knows you're carrying weight.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. Give me, from your perspective, the best theological reason for why this stuff is important. Because I think sometimes people hear these conversations and they go, oh man, you're just talking about earthly things and you're just talking about vain things and all these, but we got to focus on the Jesus and Christ and the kingdom. And my thought has always been like focusing on Jesus and Christ and the kingdom actually impacts what you put in your mouth and what you do with your body.
All day.
So give me from your perspective, like, hey, what is the clearest form of why this should matter to people?
Yeah. So our core scripture and kind of the heart of our ministry is Romans chapter 12, verse 1. And it says that we are to live as a holy living sacrifice to the Lord. Right now, in verse 11, it says, based on that sacrifice, we basically should live that way. But living as a holy sacrifice to the Lord, obviously, I know Paul is not speaking about getting a six pack, but he is speaking about stewardship. Mm-hmm. And just like we are to steward money, we are to steward our bodies.
That's good.
If you look at 66 books in the Bible, the main theme is money and food. You have it all over from Old Testament to New Testament. Mm-hmm. And you look at 1 Corinthians 6:19. You were bought at a price. We're a temple of the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. I can go on and on. You have, for example, scriptures that say, Paul saying, "Do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you can basically discern God's will." It's talking about that one thing, and lots of people come to me and say, "Hey, man, I have all these things going on," and maybe they're not people of faith, right? How do I get better? But they're not in that place yet where I can sit with them and share a scripture or pray with them.
Sure.
So I use what God has given me, and God has given me this whole idea that if the whole idea of repentance, changing your mind, can start. I'm not saying it's the end all do all. Can start by activating your physiology and changing the way you eat, because it's the only true thing that you have control over that no one can get in your way. Mm-hmm. It's your will. Mm-hmm. So that's where you can start, right? You can't control the economy. You can't control your partner. You can't control those things, but you can control yourself.
That's good.
So if you start from there, what happens is as your mind changes, your emotions are different and your actions are different. Mm-hmm. We're cognitive human beings. We think, we feel, and we act. So we impact the thought system first. And we do that through activating our physiology and the way we eat.
And oftentimes it requires a mindset shift and the belief that you can actually change, that you can actually become better. Because if we're talking about it from a macro standpoint, all of our food industry is set up against us, which makes sense why 70% of people are overweight, 40% of Americans are morbidly obese, is because all the food is processed. Yeah. It's cheaper to get 2 tacos from Jack in the Box for 99 cents or whatever they are, $1.99 each, right? Yep. Than it is to get an avocado.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like the entire industry of food in America is literally set up against us, which if we think about the world and the kingdom of darkness, like that, it's similar, right? And so it's like you have to go. So like I'm tying in the practical spiritual implication of this.
Yeah, that's where the leaven is. Right? Yeah. It's in these designer foods that are made to make you want more. So
that are cheaper than the foods we've always eaten as a species.
100%. They've cracked the code on how to get you addicted. Yep. And so everything from the way food is positioned at the grocery store, everything. I mean, if you have the top shelves, that's a prime location for each product, right? I had a buddy who used to organize these aisles, and he would tell me, he would say, "Have you ever stopped to think why cashiers always have all the junk food? You know why? This is crazy. This is mind-boggling. You're already getting stressed about the bill.
So dopamine release. Let me have something to make me feel better.
Yeah. Like, man, how much is this going to be?
Yeah.
And so then by the time you've bought all these things, you've been the entire time your brain has been processing food and thinking about food. So now you get to the register, now you have all the junk food there, and now boom, now you're hit. It's the reason why when you go to restaurants, they gift you the bread and the water. You ever stop to think about that? Yeah. Those guys are in business to make money. Right. Why do they give away the bread and the water? Well, bread is a high impact carb. Yep. When that hits your system, you spike insulin, and then they give you water to bring it down quickly. So by the time you order, you make a ton of mistakes.
That's crazy.
Insane.
That's crazy. So everywhere it's set up in a way to derail people.
100%.
Right? And we can get into the subsidies of big corn and big sugar by the government. You know.
Have you been to South America before? Okay. So when you go to South America, you realize that avocados, the real size of avocados. Avocados are that big. They're this big here in America. You look at eggs. When you, I remember I was making some eggs for breakfast, and my daughters were watching me, and my daughters were like, well, why is the egg that color? Because it actually comes out almost like there's no blood in it, but it's just a very different yellow. It's almost like a red yellow. It almost looks orange. The egg almost looks orange. Real eggs. But our food is so incredibly injected with all these hormones to make it look nicer, look bigger. They have all these things, insecticides, fecocides. The word "side" means death. So they're killing all of the stuff in the food, but the bacteria. But then they're also making it bigger, making it look prettier. And so you're eating all of this stuff, and it's making people overweight. We went to Colombia, and we were there for 11 months. I still ate pretty clean, but I had way more cheat meals than I ever have here. I never gained an extra pound.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing. Like if I go to Europe and eat a little sloppy versus like if I go to New York, I don't put on as much weight for whatever reason. Maybe because I'm moving around more, but also because it seems like even just going to London, Paris, like you don't really see a lot of overweight people walking around.
It's the difference. You could take ketchup from America and ketchup from the UK, and the ingredients are radically different. You have probably in the ketchup for Britain or UK, you have I think it's 4 ingredients. You have 17 ingredients inside of the ketchup in the US. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, the system is there. The system is there to keep people trapped. Yeah,
and also keep them consumeristic because. Correct. Your grocery bill goes up. You consume more. You get more food, which is ultimately what they want.
Yeah,
I don't think it's a malicious intent where they're trying to make people fat, but I think it's a means to an end to keep people addicted to food, which makes people fat, but then it also helps, quote unquote, helps the economy.
When you're putting money over health, I think it is malicious. I think it's all about money.
Profit. Yeah.
And it's crazy because when you hear self-regulate food, you only think about self-regulating food. But when you become a person that can self-regulate food, you can self-regulate other things. So it's interesting because if you can get people to eat more, you can get people to spend more.
Yeah. Yep.
And not just in food, just in everything, because you have a consumer mentality, and that starts by your belly.
Yeah. Wow, you said self-regulate food. If you could self-regulate food and you could self-regulate other things, right?
Yeah.
I want to tie this into we tied it into the spiritual. I want to tie it into the practical. I want to tie it into the business perspective.
Yeah.
Right. That one of my goals. Me and my therapist had this conversation. He's like, man, like you have these fitness goals, and he's like, why? And I was like, well, for me, I gamify fitness because if I could have mastery over this area of my life, I can have mastery over any area of my life, right? And oftentimes that's a direct correlation to my business, finances, self-control in general, right? So can you kind of tie in some of the correlations like between eating well, being in a healthy, fit shape, or even elite level shape, strength training, these other things, and the practical benefits of that to someone's business, creative entrepreneurship, if they're trying to start a YouTube channel, those sorts of things?
Yeah, so I think the first thing we got to think about is not think in terms of works, because oftentimes people hear this and say, oh, well, if I add these works, then my life will work. And we obviously know that's not true. I do believe, though, as I mentioned earlier, is that the will is the only thing we have control over, and the only thing that we can really, if we can master one area, that whole idea of how you do anything is how you do everything, I fully subscribe to that. So if you can become a disciplined person in an area that's so tough as taming your hunger and activating your physiology, in other words, what you're saying is, hey, I'm going to be counter culture. I'm not going to eat the things that everyone else is eating. And I'm going to go put myself through pain for 45, 60 minutes. That's very countercultural, right? If you can do those things that the vast majority of people can't do, then the question is, what can't you do, right? In other words, doing hard things is good for us.
Yes.
And so if we can train ourselves to do hard things at a basic level, then we can take that from the micro to the macro.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and then we can get into aspects of maybe your income isn't where you want to be, or your business isn't where you want to be. And the reason why that is because you have a skill deficit. There's a deficit in your skill set. There's a deficit in your ability to build relationships.
Sure.
Right? There's these deficits. And so doing the hard things is how we fill that gap of that deficit. Because if I can get lean and I can get shredded, well, I can learn Facebook ads.
Yeah,
Or I could learn how to create this thing over here. I could learn how to use the 3D printer. I could fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a strong correlation. And oftentimes the people I meet that are very successful also have some sort of regimen to their fitness and a plan for their fitness.
Yeah. So I live in South Florida, and when you go to places like Boca, Jupiter, which are very affluent areas, I mean, you look everywhere. And every single person, you see a common denominator. You see expensive watches, and everyone is fit. And you could say, well, they have the disposable time to go do it. But I think there is a correlation between getting fit and actually doing well. And I've always said that. I've had a lot of theologians push back on that, and like, nope, absolutely, the flesh contributes nothing to your spirit and to you getting ahead in life. And I disagree with that. And my perfect example of that is Arnold. I mean, Arnold has been interviewed in several places where he said, they asked him, what are the keys to success? And he says, I took such a complex endeavor like bodybuilding. He says, and then I transferred that to acting, and then I transferred that into politics. And he said, all I did was take bodybuilding concepts and just transfer them over to these different realms, and I succeeded.
That's so interesting because this is how I always thought about it, is doing the research. I read a stat where you're statistically more likely to be a millionaire than you are to have abs, because there's 15 million millionaires in America, net worth millionaires, right? You take their assets, you deduct their liabilities. On paper, they're million. I mean, I have $1 million in the bank, but they're net worth millionaires,
right?
And then there's only I want to say under 50,000 elite level athletes that are walking around at like sub 20% body fat if you're a man, and whatever, right? Was it sub? Where the abs show for women? Sub 25%, something like that.
Yeah, lower than that. So athlete status for women is under 17.
Under 17
for athlete status.
Okay,
women. Yeah.
And so I always figured if I can get abs, which is statistically harder, then I could become a millionaire.
Yes and no.
Okay.
And here's my only pushback on that.
Okay, pushback. So
yes, you can suffer, and conquering anything means you can suffer well, right? So you can suffer well. The problem is there are so many bodybuilders that are broke.
This is also true,
right? And they look like $1 million.
Yep.
They just don't have them.
Yep.
They don't have the $1 million.
Yep.
And then you wonder why.
Yep.
And it's simply because they have channeled all of their energy in one area and one area alone, right? But the idea and the thing that our overall mentorship program talks about is discipleship. And discipleship talks about being a disciplined disciple in all areas, a well-balanced person.
That's good.
And so that requires intentionality, and that requires being very strategic, and that requires being very honest with yourself and saying, what am I not good at? And what am I really, really good at?
Yeah.
And what am I not good at? And then being able to strategically transfer those strengths to the weaknesses.
That's good.
And then being very patient with yourself and learning that growth takes time.
Yeah. Well, I think there's also a difference in someone that is a professional athlete or an elite level athlete. Maybe they've always been an athlete. And someone like myself that, like, I played basketball as a kid, and then as an adult, I'm like, oh, I'm going to master this because it's a means to an end to learn how to do hard things to master other areas.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, I think, like, a buddy of mine who I'm gonna train with. So I'm saying I think that's different than the guy that's like, hey, I'm 25, I'm 30, never been an elite level athlete, never played D1 ball, never did these things, but I'm going to make a pointed effort to lock in on these aspects.
Yeah, it's just where you channel your energy.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean, I think when you can look at it that way, I think that if you have that baseline and you look great and you've mastered that, if you mastered any area, like I talk to people all the time, physicians and lawyers that come onto my program, and they're like, I've just never been fit. I'm like, man, you passed the bar.
Yeah.
You're a doctor.
Yeah.
You've been in school for 10 years.
Yep.
What can't you do?
Yep.
So it's taking our strengths and bringing it over to our weaknesses and being able to do that very strategically. And that's where people fall short.
Yeah.
Is the strategy part.
Yeah.
Because you can have great intentions, but if you don't have the right strategy,
you're
not going to go anywhere.
Tell me how you feel about this parallel. I talk a lot about goals and breaking goals and dreams down into daily non-negotiables or weekly non-negotiables.
Yep.
And the thing about non-negotiables and in making them daily is that they don't always, it's not always a one-to-one. I control the inputs, and I do enough inputs, eventually something good is going to happen. But I don't have all control of all the variables. So if I'm a farmer, I go out, I sow the seed, I work the land, I pull the weeds, I make sure there's fertilizer. Ultimately, God still has to send the rain and the sunshine, right? Would you parallel fitness and business in that regard? It's like, hey, we can control the things we can control, but you may have some sort of thyroid issue that you didn't know about. You may have different genetics that you may not know about, and it may take longer or be harder for you to get the same types of results.
Yeah, I mean, I think God created physical laws. I think if you work hard, you'll reap the benefits. I think that if for me, it's been both sides, because I'm a former professional athlete, and I had this burning desire after my career ended tragically at 23 to do things right. And then I had to take inventory of my strengths, right? And so I went in and I did that, and I came up with 3 concepts that are, by the way, they're pillars to our program. Okay. Which is clarity, getting super, super clear on what you want and why you want it, right? That's the most important thing, and that's where most of the work goes, because people always have superficial whys. But when you can actually hit a why that hits on your heartstrings, then that's going to propel you forward regardless of what's happening, right? So having clarity. I had that clarity when I was a kid. I wanted to play pro ball. Once you have that clarity, now you can go into what you were talking about, the inputs, which we call discipline. And that's the word everyone hears and they cringe when they hear it. But the truth is, it's just the ability to actually carry out specific habits consistently regardless of what happens, right?
Say that again one more time, because that's a great definition for it.
Yeah, so discipline is just being able to execute on daily habits regardless of what comes your way.
Come on. That's good. That's good.
And so you have those very, very specific, like these are the things that have to happen. These are non-negotiable. They have to happen. And then there's the word consistency, right? And then consistency simply says that, okay, now you have your clarity. Now you have your why. Now you have your habits. Now you have to understand that just like the bamboo tree, which, the farmer goes out and waters and puts seed and does all those things and doesn't see anything for 5 years. And then within 7 months, that bamboo tree grows, you have to consistently do it. You have to consistently do it. And the only way you can consistently do it is if you have clarity, your why is strong, and then you have the specific strategic habits in place that are going to allow you to get there over time.
That bamboo illustration is brilliant.
It's crazy.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right, JT, how can they get a hold of you if they're interested in the Empty Your Bucket plan? Where do they find you at?
Yeah, so all over social media, Instagram, Empty Your Bucket plan. If you want to speak directly to me, Coach JT Tapias.com or emptyyourbucketplan.com.
All right. Thank you so much, man. We'll have you back again, guys. We're out of here.
Thank you, brother.
Peace. We see according to the Bible that prayer is extremely important in terms of us being transformed from the inside out when we get aligned with God's will. For the Christians watching this channel, I want you guys to implement these spiritual disciplines in your day-to-day life. And the only way I've been able to do this consistently is through writing down my prayers in a prayer journal that does a few things. One, it allows me to reflect and come to God humbly and ask Him to move on my behalf. And 2, it allows me to document my prayers, which ultimately help me remember the very things that I was praying for and see the hand of God tangibly in my life when He answers them. So I would urge you, consider writing down your prayers. It could be in a blank notebook. It could even be on your phone. Or you could check out the one I personally designed and used for my own quiet time and spiritual discipline that I think will be a huge blessing. It's the exact structure and system that I've used for years to pray and be more consistent in my spiritual disciplines. You can pick yours up today by clicking the link in the pinned comment below. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.